Thank you for joining us for Turn the Page with Paige, brought to you by Southwestern Illinois College. I'm your host, Paige Hulsey. Punk rock music emerged in the mid-1970s with the rise of bands like the Stooges, the Ramones, and the Sex Pistols. Well, now, both children and parents, or grandparents too, can take a look back on the music that really defined the generation. Local author Eric Morse brings us What is Punk?, which is, by the way, celebrating its 10th anniversary with incredible snapshots of Play-Doh figures to help tell the story. And author Eric Morse from St. Louis joins us today in studio. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Now, to call this gentleman an author, while I think is a wonderful title, really doesn't do his long resume justice, with everything from DJ to social worker, writer, and so much more. Music, though, Eric, really seems to be a constant through all of that.
Yeah, it really has been. I graduated from college here in the mid-90s and immediately made a beeline to Seattle, which was where everything was happening at the time. And I had a lot of career ambitions in mind, but the thing that I was really in love with was music. And I landed in the middle of a really thriving music and art industry and music and art scene, and just immediately took to it. And started out as a social worker and pretty quickly started DJing on the side, and then after about a year of that, I just quit my day job and went on tour with the band, and the rest was music.
It sounds like a dream come true for a lot of people.
Yeah, it was. It was a lot of fun. It was really pursuing the thing that I loved, and I learned pretty quickly that my role within the music industry was not necessarily on stage,
okay.
which was a good thing for me to learn soon and early. And then I worked in record labels and music companies and did a lot of promotion and marketing and things like that.
So with a life story like that, a passion like that, I understand wanting to capture the history of a genre like punk, but why did you want to do that in a children's book?
Well, it was funny. So at the time, I had moved from Seattle to New York. I'd been living in New York and working at a record label for a long time, and had my first child. And I had this punk rock I had been in the middle of a punk rock scene for quite a few years, and that was sort of where I cut my teeth professionally and in the music industry. And I was out on a walk with my son and my wife at the time, and we were walking to the park, and we passed a stoop sale, which New York City doesn't have garage sales, they have stoop sales. And there was a little board book there, like for infants, called This Is Pink. And it was like a flamingo and a pig and, cute little things. But out of the corner of my eye, I misread it, and I thought it said, This Is Punk. Oh. And from that moment on, it sort of became an inside joke with my wife and me that somebody needs to teach these kids about punk, and it just is one of those ideas that just sticks in your head for a while. And
that's a great story. I like that. Like that seed was planted, and you were not going to get rid of it until you made it a reality.
Yeah, and and since then, as that seed developed, I started to think a lot about the world and the sort of cultural space that my kids were going to inhabit as they grew up, and what people in my generation thought of or knew to be punk is a very different thing from what it was then. So I was really hoping to kind of capture the sort of revolutionary energy and spirit of it that when it first came out.
And you did so with such precise meter and rhyme that makes this book really fun to read out loud. I really encourage you to do that. What was your strategy, or what is your strategy when you put pen to paper? I mean, does it just naturally flow like that in your mind?
It's gotten to the point where I think that way, but no, at the time, of course, I started writing this when I had I think he was about 9 months old. I had a young son. I now have 4 kids. I've done a lot of reading children's books, especially to toddlers or kids who aren't necessarily, absorbing the meaning of all the words. And you start to realize and understand that just the sound is important. And sometimes you're reading so that the kid falls asleep. Sometimes you're reading so that the kid is engaged with the pictures, And so I found that in reading with my kids, the rhyming couplets and the meter really like gives it a nice sort of rhythm. So I wanted to make sure we worked that in.
Well, as nice as it sounds, it looks amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, this is such a cool style for it. Basically, every page is a still photo of a character literally made from Play-Doh. So tell me about the illustrator who you work so closely with.
Yeah, so I knew that the visuals were going to be the key to the whole thing. When we were writing What is Punk, I worked with a couple illustrators before I found Annie, and they were working in a style that was very sort of true to punk imagery. But my little kids were like, well, these people look really mad, or these people look scary. And then one day I stumbled across this blog called Hey Ho Let's Dough. And Hey Ho Let's Go, of course, is a line from a Ramones song. And she was recreating Ramones photos, classic photos of the Ramones in Play-Doh. And I was blown away. And it had this like sort of punk energy and aesthetic, while also being really accessible to kids and super fun. I love showing it off with kids because they immediately, like, you can see their brains start thinking, I can do that.
Yeah. And then they can watch the stop motion videos, which are so cool.
Yeah. So the artist is named Annie Yee. She lives in Los Angeles, and she's incredible. And we worked together on every scene, and every time she would send me something, it was like Christmas morning. I was so excited.
I can see why. And then you work together, obviously, on your second book, What is Hip Hop?
Yes.
Why did you want to capture that genre as well?
Well, it was funny because, I told you the story of What is Punk and how I had this idea of like punk rock, but really I grew up being in love with hip hop. Like out here in St. Louis, I remember mowing the lawn and listening to LL Cool J, which is a very funny visual, yeah. Not exactly walking the mean streets, but really, as soon as we were writing What is Punk, I immediately was like, well, the stories I really want to tell are also hip hop. And, I was working with Annie. She was sending me these Play-Doh illustrations. And I started thinking about, people like Biggie Smalls, who kind of looks like he's made out of Play-Doh anyway, And so immediately my brain was like, what could we do with hip hop? And so as soon as we got the green light from the publisher, we started with What is Hip Hop? And her illustrations in that one are really incredible. She does like break dancers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. What has the reception been? I mean, have you heard from any of the figures who've seen themselves now as a Play-Doh figure?
I have. It's been great. I've heard mostly from people who were featured in What is Punk, and they've been delighted and they've had a lot of fun with it. Yeah.
Okay, there's still a lot of music to cover. Are you going to work on books to feature any other genres?
I would so in keeping with the same, what would this person look like in Play-Doh, I would love to do what is new wave, and we could do David Bowie and The Cure. You can probably imagine The Cure in crazy Play-Doh. So and additionally, I'm working on a few kind of young adult, middle grade pieces too.
Staying busy for sure.
Trying to keep busy.
Well, congratulations on 10 years
of
these books. They're a fantastic read. The visuals are great. And it's kind of a fun trip down memory lane too.
Yeah.
I think for folks. Yeah. Before you go, can you share a recommendation for another children's book that you enjoy?
Sure. I was thinking about this, and the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra just did their performance with DMC, Daryl McDaniels of Run DMC, as well as the Sugar Hill Gang. DMC wrote a children's book called Daryl's Dream, and it's a great book, and just kind of keeping with the theme of keeping the old school hip hop and music alive and well. Daryl's Dream is my suggestion.
A great recommendation.
Thanks.
Eric, thank you so much for joining us today.
Appreciate
Thanks for
it.
bringing these stories to life in Play-Doh form and in children's book form as well. It's been a joy to learn about it.
Thanks.
It's been a joy to have you here as well. We hope that you'll come back soon for the next episode of Turn the Page with Paige.